First and foremost, now all you guys in the room have name tags on, which I'm glad to see. Now potentially we have a new member, John List. I don't see him on the Zoom call. So John, are you in the room?
Yep, I'm in the room.
Awesome.
I don't have a name tag on it, but
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
the
we'll
only one without a name tag, probably so that somebody,
There you go. We'll get that rectified. Don't worry. So John, if you would just say a few words about yourself, what type of photography you like to do, how you found the club, what you expect out of us, et cetera, et cetera.
Just real quick, yeah, I've been doing photography for many years, but moved to Colorado 2 years ago. To be with family. I mostly specialize in black and white and exclusively, but and then do architecture, landscape type. I don't do portraits. I don't do weddings. Don't do people. So, but anything that sits still, I'll take a picture of.
Well, obviously you don't do kids either.
Yeah. Just recently started up my business, I'll call it, it's online. Yep. So, just getting there. It took me a couple of years to finally, I left the Charlotte area and then came here. Found the club online. I figure I need to broaden out, so this is the first club I've joined and
okay.
Appreciate your letting me in, at least for now, until you see my work.
No.
And then you might want to,
He does great work, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Joe. Personally, I have seen your work because when you send in your competition images, I do get those, and you do some excellent work, my friend. So yeah, we're glad to have you here. Glad you're part of the gang. And looking
real quick, I'm more than willing to share what I know, my knowledge. So I'm not one to keep it inside. So
awesome. Well, we may tap you for that actually. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Is Gwen Patton at the Lone Tree?
Yes, I'm at Lone Tree.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, then you will be talking to John sometime later tonight, I'm sure.
Yes. I'm supposed to be there, but I just got out of elbow surgery. So
oh dang.
Yeah. So I'm feeling fine right now because well, look at that. I've been to a couple of clubs as well. Yeah, I'm not, let's just say I shouldn't be driving.
Okay. We'll go with that. So on Zoom here, I do see Kyle Derlam. I think did you join us last time?
Yeah, I did, and
yes.
my check is in the mail, as they say.
Awesome, we love that.
I enjoyed the presentation 2 weeks ago, and am excited to join.
Fantastic, love to hear that. Thank you very much, Carl.
Welcome.
Now I have a number of other people that may be guests in the room. Do we have any others like Don or Sari, Sheila Davis, Cecilia?
Cecilia and Sheila are certainly in the room, and Kirk, are you a new member as well? And Kirk is here as a new member. He's a new member.
Yes, yeah. Okay. Well, if you would like to one by one, again, basically the same as what I asked John, what type of photography you like to do, how you found us, etc.
Great. I'll start. I'm Sheila Davis. This is my second, guest meeting. I did the Zoom one for the deciding moment the other week, last week. I just moved to Colorado in October from Virginia. I like mostly landscape and travel photography.
Very good.
And Cecilia?
I'm Cecilia Zapata. I'm originally from New Mexico, but I've been here in the Denver area for 30 years in July. And I love taking pictures of my family and really anything, flowers, it doesn't matter. I love taking pictures, but I've only used my phone. I've never used a real camera, and I'm looking forward to learning how to use that. I found the club online. This is my first meeting, and I'm excited to learn more.
Very good. Well, thank you also. And Cecilia, of course, you'll get an invitation to our next meeting also.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think that's it in terms of guests. Kirk, did you want to say any?
Sorry, introduce myself a bit at
Yeah.
the last meetings, but
Right.
I'm Kurt. I've been in Colorado since 1980s, I guess. Like to take primarily family pictures, that's the dog, whatever shots of them, and I like landscape photography. And I'm just here. I found out about the club online, and just want to learn a bit more, be a little bit better. I've been kind of dabbling in this for about 30 years. Never really got
Now you're gonna get serious.
serious about it.
Good. Well, welcome.
Okay. Well, while everybody was speaking, I see that we got two other people who jumped into Zoom. Gabe, glad you could join us again. Gabe's a new member. I think we've spoken to you once or twice before. And Ethan Sroka, if you could unmute and just give us a little bit about yourself, what kind of photography you like and how you found the club and those kind of things. And yeah, he just dropped off. Okay.
He scared him off.
Darn it. Hate when it happens. Okay. So with those things taken care of, let me introduce our judge tonight. We have Cheryl Opperman is back with us. She hasn't judged for us for about a year and a half. Cheryl is a, let me read all this stuff here, is a nationally acclaimed nature photographer who has traveled to every continent in the world capturing spectacular images of nature, wildlife, and indigenous culture. Widely published, her photographs have appeared in print, on the web, on television, and in solo and group exhibits, resulting in a list of clients or credits, which include the American Humane Association, Overseas Adventure Travel, the Denver Post, National Geographic Society, and the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. Cheryl's aesthetic compositions, artistic use of light, and exquisite detail have been honored with several prestigious awards from organizations including the Earth Day Network, Nature's Best Photography, the International Photography Awards, and the National Wildlife Federation. She was also featured as a leading female nature photographer by Outdoor Photographer magazine and has appeared in on-camera interviews with 9 News Denver, Luminous Landscape, and the Smithsonian Earth. Using the power of photography to inspire interest in the environment and other cultures, she has presented slideshows or classes on various topics to schools, camera clubs, the Intermountain Regional Headquarters of the National Park Service, the Crane Trust, and the North American Nature Photography Association. Cheryl is a 1992 honors graduate of Brooks Institute of Photography, holding a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Industrial Scientific Photography. Cheryl has done a lot, and we are very glad to have her here. So, Cheryl, I will turn to you if you will unmute and if you want to say a few words.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I thought I'd start by sharing my screen and telling everybody a little bit about my workshops. And I just thought I'd share some images from some of the workshops that I do around the world. Let me just get this up and going here.
There we go.
All right, it's hopefully going to do my intro slide there. Oh, yes, great. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about each workshop and kind of rely on you to reach out to me if you're interested in one of the destinations. And obviously the color on some of the images through Zoom, as we know, aren't necessarily perfectly accurate, but at least it'll give you an overall idea of some of the places that I go. For those of you who have followed me for a while, and I know these dates are wrong because I haven't redone the slide since 2020, but I teach every March at the Crane Trust in Nebraska. And, we have over 1 million sandhill cranes that migrate through the region every year. We do workshops and photo tours. So it's really a wonderful destination. We do still have some space for this year if you're interested, but you can get dancing cranes. Even if you have snow, it can make for interesting images as well. We get some really amazing sunsets there. And this is a picture from inside the blind. So you can see, it's still useful to have long lenses, but we're really pretty close to the cranes and they really fly right in front of our blinds. So it's good viewing and you've got good range of motion with your camera lenses. We allow tripods, which a lot of places don't when they're in blind. So it's a great experience. I also just started doing prairie chicken tours in Kansas. I have a landowner with a private lek, so I do very small groups there, but it's a short grass lek. So as you can see, there's not a lot of grass stinging up to get in your way. So it's quite a unique opportunity. It's not on my website right now because I thought I was full for this year, but I have had a couple of cancellations. So feel free to call if you're interested, and I might add it to my website soon here too. But they're a lot of fun to photograph and great action shots. So, and during the afternoon, we can even go do some scenics. There are some nice trees in the area and other wildlife as well. So that's a lot of fun. I'm starting a trip to Iceland this summer. Again, this is not on my website yet, but will be soon. And there I concentrate on obviously a lot of waterfalls and scenics. It's spectacular for waterfalls. And but there are glaciers and bird life as well. So it's really a wonderful trip. Antarctica, I just got back from Antarctica. I went in October, November. There's another trip going in October, November of this year as well. There's also actually a February trip going that I am not going to be going on, but we're offering a 25% discount. So if anybody could go on short notice and you're really interested, let me know. There is still space available on that. And, you know, if you haven't been, this is really worthwhile too. It is expensive and it's, you know, quite an undertaking to go, but it's just spectacular. So here's some just images from those voyages, some black and white as well. And then Tanzania, Africa, I go usually every September. And then if people want to go other times of the year, I can set up trips for different dates as well, and then send it out to my list and see if we can get enough people. So don't ever hesitate to reach out. This is the vehicle that I use, the type of vehicle. And I always give people a full row so you can photograph on both sides. So only 3 people, it seats 6, but I only put 3 in a vehicle and I sit in the front seat. And then we provide bean bags. So you have a higher position and a lower position, and it's always just ready to go. So you can bring your own bean bag to you know, adjust the height, but it's a really nice setup. And again, just incredible bird life and wildlife. Obviously, Africa is a top destination for wildlife. So, and some very nice sunsets in Africa as well. And September is the wildebeest migration. So if you want to see that, that's really the best time to go, August, September. And here's a listing so everybody can sort of go back. I know this is being recorded, so you can always go back to this and look up my website. I just got back from Mexico as well, and I'm adding a Mexico monarchs trip for butterflies. And it's really interesting because a lot of the reserves only allow you to spend about 20 minutes with the butterflies, but we have a location where we can stay all day. So it's going to be really wonderful for photography because they also rope off the areas. And so this location allows you, I mean, we obviously have to be very careful and respectful, but again, I take small groups and we're able to get quite close to the butterflies and stay, you know, and spend hours with them. So it's really a unique opportunity. So anyway, if you have questions, please just call me, email me, and I'll be glad to tell you more about any of those opportunities. So we can move on to the judging if you like, and let me stop sharing here. And
Bob, are you ready? Ready. Okay. So Bob will be showing the images. I will be naming out the titles. And then every so often when we have, you know, 6 or 8 or whatever, 9s and 10s, we will pause for a bit and go talk to the image makers and get their comments about their images. So if you're ready, Bob, let's roll.
Great. Everybody ready? And you can hear me okay still?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I know it's going to be a little more difficult for people on Zoom because I can point out things on the screen here. So I'll try to describe them the best I can in words if I'm talking about cropping or that sort of thing. I did have a chance to kind of go through the images once to look at them a little closer, since again, the screen doesn't necessarily display them as well as we might like. So I'll try and give you some, both positive and criticism that's hopefully helpful. I mean, the whole idea here is to learn and grow in our photography. So please don't take anything personally. I'm just trying to help you become a better photographer and point out maybe things that you didn't see or give you some suggestions of how to make things better.
Okay. Leaping a Ponta de Piedade, or I'm sorry I butchered that. Well,
All right, so everybody can see now?
yes, at least I can see in Zoom, I can see Bob's screen. So yes, we're much better.
Okay, great, super. All right, that'll make it easier. So again, nice action and expressions that's working really well in the image. And you've got some nice, you have a very contrasty lighting situation here. So you did a good job of balancing out the sunlight in the back and the light on your subject. There are some technical issues though with the image that I think could be improved. We definitely have motion blur. So a faster shutter speed would have helped a lot to get rid of that. And I think, in an image like this, you really want to freeze the action. I mean, if you're going to do motion blur, I tend to either go really far where it's obvious that I'm motion blurring, or I want to freeze the action. So I would increase the shutter speed. We are cropped a little bit tight on this side of the image. So we always want to try and give a little bit more room around our subject area, which is helpful. There are chromatic aberrations in this image. They're it's a little harder to see here, but you can see a magenta fringe and a green fringe around the hair, a magenta fringe around the arms. So that's usually a problem with the lens, but it can be easily corrected nowadays in software. So be aware of that. Look for color fringing. In fact, when I'm processing my images nowadays, I almost always just turn on the button that allows the program to correct for chromatic aberrations. The background is a little bit busy. So if I were doing this shot again, I might actually try and turn them to where they have just ocean behind. It would be easier. You wouldn't have such contrasty light, and you would really then just focus on the people and the action. So, I think that you've got some good things going, but there are definitely some things to work on. So I'm going to give this one a 7. All right, great. So actually,
I'm sorry. I will
You'll-
announce the titles on each of these images that come up.
great, thank you. Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Sounds great. So architectural photography is actually what I did a lot of when I first got out of school. So it was how I made my living initially. And so I do really like architectural photography. And I think this compositionally is just beautifully handled. Great diagonal lines, it leads you into the picture. I like the light that's streaming through the windows. It's really a very well handled image. So I don't have a lot of criticism, but I'm going to give one little helpful tip. And that is, whenever I was doing setups like this, if I could, and I don't know what kind of access you had, but I would always go and I would straighten all of my chairs and make them all the same distance from the table and that sort of thing. So I'm still going to give you a 10, but that's something to keep in mind when you're doing architectural photography, is take a little extra time and go and look for those little tiny details that just give it that extra something special.
This is blood moon, total lunar eclipse.
All right, so the lunar eclipses are very fun to photograph, and they are a challenge because we have different intensity of light when we go from, a full lit moon to the eclipse phase. Now, in this particular image, it looks like everything was sharp when I put it on my screen and well exposed. So all of that seemed to be very good. Now, the thing that I did not like as well is the spacing. And so what I did is I took my elliptical marquee tool and I used the middle shot and to see how, closely these were spaced if you saw the full image, right? And they're not equally spaced. So I'm going to encourage whoever did this to go back and rework this, because I think it has a lot of potential, but I think it would be nicer if the spacing is consistent. So, and you'll be able to judge that if you use that marquee tool to lay it out. I probably would also, I don't know if I like having this in the middle. That's a kind of a personal preference, I think I probably would start this at the end and then run this way. I think just logically for me, it would make more sense. So, I think technically, with the exception of the spacing issue, I think, it's really pretty well done. But in order so that you can enter it again, because I know if you get a 7 or less, you could re-enter. I read the rules. I'm going to give you a 7 because I really think it would be worth reworking this and entering it in the future. Fair enough? Okay. All right.
Waterfall through crack.
Great. So we had several black and whites, which is really nice to see. I love black and white as a medium. I think it's very effective, especially when you don't have a lot of color in the image anyway. So it did look like you had good detail in the water when I looked at my screen, and I like the shutter speed you chose. I like the slow shutter speed to give that really milky, smooth look to the water. But compositionally on this one, I would have gone horizontally because I don't know, again, what's our subject, right? And that's a question I say with any image, really look at it and determine what your subject is. And to me, the subject is the waterfall. And so is the rest of this information up here helping tell the story about the waterfall, or is it just extra that we don't need? And for me, I would rather just go horizontally, maybe show a little bit more of the foreground here and really focus in. And then it's a nice rule of thirds that kind of leads your eye across the frame. But all of this up here is really not helping us, I think, be directed toward the subject. Does that make sense? So again, I think you could, work on this, rework it. I'm going to give it a 7 so that you have the opportunity to do that.
Last Frontier.
All right. So, this is one of those situations where I think breaking the rule of thirds and putting something in the middle makes a lot of sense. Most of the time we want to have the 2/3, 1/3, but when we have sort of a reflection like this, and especially where we have some variation in the clouds, that's really nice to show on both ends, putting it in the center works really well. So, I think compositionally it was handled extremely well. I don't mind that this section is really dark on the left. I think it does kind of help give it a little bit of depth. It's not a super dramatic mountain range itself, so that's not really a criticism of the photographer, but I think for the mountain range you handled it very well, and it looks sharp. So it would just be nice to see maybe a little more drama in the sky or things that would make it a better photograph just because of the environment. So it's not necessarily what you did as a photographer. So I'm going to give it an 8 because it's done well, but it could just, it's the location more than anything. It doesn't make it quite as impactful.
This is
All
On
right.
the Hunt.
On the Hunt. So, there's always a question as to whether photographing things from the back is a good idea. I mean, when you're in a situation, obviously you don't have the opportunity to go around to the front. So, it is really nice to have this curve of the lines in the road. That does, that's a nice leading line, kind of almost an S curve type situation that's occurring there, that helps lead us into the picture. But, probably my preference would be to be photographing the scene with them coming toward me. I think it would just be more impactful. But, I think you did what you could with the scene. I might have, it gets a little tricky when you have these dogs at the front here that are so close to the edge. I might have maybe cropped these out and tried to have a little more space in the front of the first dog, but they're pretty tight together anyway, so you don't have a lot of options there. This one is a little bit, I think, on the cool side, so you might play with your color temperature a little bit. Did you have a question? Go cropping with your hand. Yeah, there you go. I know it's hard. If I should have brought a big cardboard. thing to put up, but yeah, so, you know, I think again, it's challenging coming from the back. So you did the best you could with it, but I think, you know, next time, see if there's a way for you to get around the front and work the situation that way. So I'll give this one a 7. All right.
Sharp eyes.
Okay, great. So wildlife, which is mostly what I do, obviously nowadays, and it's certainly my passion. I like the black and white again. I think it's nice to do wildlife in black and white. We don't see it that often. In terms of technical quality, you know, the composition is really quite good. You know, I might have left a tiny bit more space on the left, but it's really very acceptable. And obviously we always want to have our negative space where the animal is looking. So that's handled nicely. I did look at this on my monitor and it does not look like the head is sharp. So, you know, it absolutely was correct, I think, to, you know, put your focus point more on the body, but you just needed to stop down a little bit more to pull the head into focus. You know, nowadays that we have digital, I really do in a situation like this like to see the body and the eyes in focus. You absolutely with an animal have to have the eyes in focus. If the eyes aren't in focus, then I would just, you know, probably not keep that image. So, you know, when you have a background like this, that you don't have anything to pull into focus and you've got nice bright sunlight, there's no disadvantage to stopping down more. I find with wildlife photography, a lot of people are afraid to stop down. And I really encourage it. In fact, I encourage it in other situations where we can use Photoshop to blur the background. So you definitely needed to stop down more. The other thing is the light direction. If you could have, and I don't know what your situation was like, so that's what's hard as a judge. You know, I can tell you where you really should be, but you could say, but the background was terrible if I moved over there. So that may have been what happened, but I would have liked to have seen you move a little bit around the subject so that we're photographing more from this direction and getting that nice front light. So, you know, on this one, because of those technical difficulties and the lighting, I'm going to give it a 7.
Autumn waterfall.
All right, and again, and I really do like waterfalls too. I mean, wildlife's my favorite, but waterfalls are wonderful. So, and this is very, very nicely composed. Again, I like the shutter speed you chose for the nice silky smooth water. It did look like we had plenty of detail in the water. It's very, on these screens, it's just, highlights look like they're blowing out. So it does help me to have images in advance. So that was handled very nicely. You know, I think that in the processing, you might be able to go back and it just seemed like you could have maybe opened up a little more shadow detail in the processing when I looked at it on my screen, but it's really handled quite well. The only other thing compositionally I would have done, because obviously you're using the rule of thirds, we've got a nice leading line in from the water, but when I have a rock or something like this, it really bothers me when we just clip a tiny portion off. So I either try and crop really into it very deliberately, or I try and leave the edge in. Okay, so that's getting kind of nitpicky, but it does make a difference when you're doing it. Oh, and that's at the bottom right of the image. Thank you. At the bottom right, you can see this rock where it's just clipping the very corner. So I just would have, you know, made sure that I was including that entire rock. In this particular image, I definitely would have included the entire rock. In some images, you might want to just crop in tighter, but just, you know, zoom out a little bit more. You know, our sensors have so much information now that you're better off going a little bit wider so that you do have some cropping room when you get back to the computer. So I would always, if you have a situation like that, give yourself a little extra room. So I'm actually going to give this a 9. I think it's a very nice image.
This is wild cherry.
All right. And now we're going into the studio, which again, I haven't done for a while, but we had to do all of this stuff in school, certainly. And these are really difficult images. You know, I know how technically challenging they are. So, and I think this was handled exceptionally well. You've got nice, you know, light on the cherry. the light that you have on the wine. I'm assuming that's wine, or I don't know what the beverage is, but it's illuminated well. We don't have, you know, bright highlights in the glass itself. So we've got edge highlights, which are very nice. And I really do also like the gradation that you have in the background here. So I think this image is very well done. The only thing I would have done maybe is, again, it's cropped maybe a tiny bit tight. So I might have backed off just a little bit, but I'm not going to count it down for that. I'm going to give it a 10.
Luca's Snow Run.
So, well, dogs are always fun and cute, right? Who can't love a dog photo? So, and this one's no exception. So really, really cute expression, really cute dog. You know, this screen is actually brighter than when I looked at it on my calibrated screen. So I think you could go back and reprocess this and bring up your shadow detail a little bit, because when I looked at it on my screen, you know, I could barely see the dog's right eye over here. So I would really try and process it so that those eyes pop out. And a lot of times I'll actually go into with wildlife, with dogs, with any even people sometimes, I'll go in and I'll just select the eyes and I'll just brighten the eyes independently of everything else. Because again, we really, with any person or animal, we're looking at the eyes. So they really need to pop, because that's where we want the viewer to look. So in terms of that, you know, again, if we say the subject is what's going on here with the dog, I mean, obviously the subject is the dog, but where we want to direct the viewer is to the face and to the green, you know, toy that it's holding. And so do we really need all of this other information? I don't think so. So I would come in and I would crop this. I don't even maybe go square on this image, and I would just crop it right around the face. I don't think you're really gaining anything with the other areas of the image, and you know, you kind of clip the tail, I think, on the end anyway. So I would just come back in and try a tighter crop and see how that works. And do reprocessing. And I think this could be a really, you know, strong image that way. So I'm going to give it a 7. So it gives you a chance to do that and re-enter if you want.
Morning lights.
All right. So, you know, again, you're out there at the right time of day, you know, really nice light hitting this building over here. And I like that a lot. And you really lucked out on the water, because you've got just a mirror reflection, which is obviously hard to get. So we want to take advantage of that. You know, again, so our subject is really the building and the reflection, in my opinion. So do we really need all of these trees over here? You know, probably not. And the other thing is we've got these cattails in the front, but the way that they're positioned, they feel almost like a block to me, instead of something that's helping to lead me into the picture. So if you could have moved, and again, you know, I don't know what the situation was where you could walk, where you couldn't, but I probably would have focused more in on just the building and the reflection, maybe gone vertical and tried to move, you know, around to the left to get the cattails out of the way and just have a cleaner reflection. And if you did have cattails, you know, if they could frame around it instead of more in front of it, I think that would be really helpful. So, but the light is, you know, really pretty hitting the building. So I think there's a lot of potential here. I'm going to give it a 7.
Is that hat edible?
Great title, really good title. And titles are certainly, you know, important if you're doing an art exhibit or a competition. So, you know, the positioning of the hat with the sheep is, you know, well done. I think that works really well. I like the diagonal lines you're using with the fence. That works a lot better than if you had shot straight on. So whenever you can look for diagonal lines, they tend to be more pleasing to the eye. There is some shadow detail, I think, that you could maybe pull out a little bit more with reprocessing. This shot does get a little bit on the busy side. So, you know, that's just sort of the nature of what it is, but it does, you know, it tells a nice story and it's a fun shot and it's sharp. You know, it was well handled that way. It might be a little on the cool side as well, so you might play with the color temperature just a little bit if you go back and rework the processing. So I'm going to give it an 8 because it is sharp and it doesn't have a lot of technical flaws and it tells a nice story.
Catching air.
All right, again, black and white, which I love that people entered so many black and whites. It's a lot of fun. And I think it works particularly well for this subject because we probably wouldn't have a lot of color anyway. So to me, again, you know, if I look at this image and I say, what is the subject? To me, it's the shadow. So the kid is really kind of blending into the background here. You can see that, right? And there's not a great way to get away from that because that's just the nature of where the park is. So, it's a nice shot for what it is, but I think it could be really improved if you went back to the same location and just practiced a little more. And if you have somebody, if this is like a grandchild and they'll do it over and over for you, that would be really perfect. Because what I would like to see is I would like to see the feet kind of in this just below where they are in the more open part of the cement. I'm trying to explain it to the people on Zoom. It's easier for people in the room. And I'd like to see then the shadow would come down a little bit lower into this really clean cement. So we could get rid of all of this busyness in the background in the upper portion of the image. And I would just crop so that, again, we have the feet down in this cleaner portion of the cement, the shadow that goes lower, and we would just have a shot that includes the shadow and kind of the feet and the bottom of this. I wouldn't even show the entire kid here. And I'd make it a long panoramic. And I think that would be a really powerful image. Does everybody see that? Does that make sense? So, so I think it's working nicely, but if you went back and redid this, it could really be something very special, I think. So, I'm gonna give it a 7, so you can go back and rework it if you want and then re-enter. But I do like the shadow. It's great.
Yeah, question.
Yeah.
Would it be just as dramatic if the scooter was on the ground with the shadow connected to it?
I don't think so. I like it in the air. I think that gives it a lot of drama. And the thing is, if it were on the ground, you wouldn't get this distinction between the shadow. It would be blending together the bottom of the shadow. So I really think it's a challenging shot to make because you've got to get the timing right. So you definitely want to do a burst, fast shutter speed burst of frames, but it's repeatable, right? So if you could get a kid that would cooperate with you, you could just have them keep doing it. And eventually, you line it up well, but eventually luck is going to prevail too. And you're going to get it lined up exactly where you want. But does that make sense? Because I like the separation. Okay.
Awaking Amaryllis.
All right. So this is a really nice, simple, clean image. I like the way, again, we've got kind of a diagonal direction of the flower, so that's working very well. The light is soft and nice. I think that's working well also. It is not sharp. So I definitely looked at this on the computer, and the red portion, almost the entire red portion, is out of focus. So this is something you could definitely go back and redo. And I don't know, it looks like it was brought into a studio. Sometimes people take cards out into the weather. If you have wind, it makes it really difficult with sort of macro photography. But if you can bring it into a studio, you should have no problem stopping down more to get that depth of field. We don't have anything again in the background to pull into focus. So we just need to adjust our settings so that we make sure we have the appropriate depth of field. Or you can do focus stacking. That's another great technique. In fact, a lot of camera bodies now will do it for you. It's really impressive. So keep those things in mind. The other thing I would really consider if you redo this image is I would consider going to a black background. And the reason is our eye always goes to the lightest part of the image. So white is going to compete with the color. where black is going to lead us directly into the color. So I think if you made those changes, this would be a beautiful, just beautiful, simple, nice image that would score really well. So I'm going to give you a 7 so you can go redo it and re-enter it.
Before we go too much farther,
Mhm.
Cheryl, I hear you giving a lot of 7s, so you can redo it, so you can,
Yes.
saying that's it. On some images that you've commented on, I can
Mhm.
see that they can be reworked, but like the last image, that the only reworking of that can be done is reshooting it.
Reshoot. So does that count? Do you allow, does that
Well,
count?
reshoot's going to be a totally new image, so that
Okay,
image would be
okay. So they
judged
can, okay. All right,
right.
that's good to know. So if they have to reshoot it, then it would
Yeah,
be counted as a new image anyway.
yeah,
I
I
mean,
would
I
like
would
to
still
hear
give it a
just
7 because of the technical
okay,
problems with the focus. So
okay,
I mean, it really was quite out of focus,
right.
but okay,
But
definitely.
also, I think you don't necessarily have to say I'm giving this a 7 so you can re-enter it. I
Okay,
mean that's implied.
okay,
We
great.
all know that
Super.
already. So just
Sounds
if you could
great.
just give the scores and then we'll carry on.
Sounds great.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And this is Boss Man.
Okay. All right. So I think this is an image that only would have worked in black and white. I don't think it would have worked at all in color. It's extremely contrasty. The light direction is not maybe what we would ideally go for, but I think you actually handled it extremely well for what it is. So I think by going to black and white, it's more dramatic. I think obviously you did something to sort of highlight this person more, some dodging or burning or whatever technique you used in processing. And I like that because, this is where we want the eye to go. It's following the rule of thirds. We're telling a story here. So, I actually really like the way you handled it. I think it was done very well. And even some of the noise we have, I think gives it kind of a gritty look. So you might have left just a tiny more room again on the lower left portion of the image, just because I always like to have plenty of room, where people they have room to move into the image, and we're kind of cropping tight on these shadows at the bottom left. So just a little bit more room there, but I'm going to give this image an 8.
Copper Creek.
All right, Copper Creek. So I really like the color that you have in the water here. I think that's working really well. We do have a lot of specular highlight, or bright highlights on the water. They're actually probably more diffused, but it's a very, we've got specular water with it looks like an overcast day, and we're getting all of these white patches in the water, and that's really pulling my eye away from the color, because I think what is beneficial about this image is having the nice color. So when you go out and photograph this kind of scene again, take a polarizing filter. Polarizing filters actually will work pretty well even on overcast days when you have reflections in water like this, and I think you'd get better color saturation there. And then the shadows are blocking up quite a bit in the back. We don't have like a real strong waterfall or anything in this image. Really, to me, the color is more the subject. So you could also even slow your shutter speed down more, and that would help to blur things out, but you really need a polarizer here. So I'm going to give this one a 7 as well.
Ice sculpture.
All right. So I'm not sure if this is from Antarctica or the north polar regions, but it's
if you give it the right score, you'll find out.
Oh, great. Okay, super.
Not trying to drive what you're scoring here.
I understand. I hear you. No, but it's a very nice image. I mean, I like the shape. You've got this nice curve coming around. The blue color of the ice is a nice contrast against the gray sky, because as you know, if you go to polar regions, you have a lot of gray sky. So if you can find these kind of blue icebergs, it really pops well. you know, I might have just given it a tiny bit more room on the bottom, but it's not real crowded. But I think otherwise, you know, there's good detail, good color. You didn't blow any of the highlights. It's a nice shape. So I'm going to give this one a 9.
A squabble marring a very wonderful moment.
And it is a very wonderful moment. This is great behavior. So that's handled really, really nicely. You know, and it's hard to capture these kind of moments. And you were also working in a very busy sort of scene. So I think you did an excellent job of, you know, finding the perfect angle to capture this kind of behavior. I mean, you know, we have some busy material up here, but right behind your subject, you've got really pretty nice background areas. So I think that was handled well. In terms of improving it, you know, again, because we have so much busy material up here, I would have just gotten rid of that. So you could crop and go almost to a square from where you are now. If you were to recompose in the field, I would give a little more space at the bottom because we're just getting a little crowded here. So it would have been, you know, it would have been nicer to start here and sort of end a little bit below where you are and get rid of the top portion. But to improve this image, you could just crop off the top and that would work nicely. But they look sharp and it's a great moment. So I'm going to go ahead and give this an 8.
This is Bianca.
All right. So again, you know, nice use of black and white. I think this is a very effective image in black and white. It really helps to bring out the texture of the road and the texture of the buildings. You did an excellent job of keeping your lines straight. So that can be done, you know, in camera. It can also be done if you just, again, photograph a little bit wider. We can do that in software now quite easily as well. We do have a little bit of motion blur in the dog. So I would have liked to have seen a little faster shutter speed to freeze that action. But you know, it's just, it leads right over into the women talking, you know, the expressions are great. The only other thing I might have liked to have seen in this image is you know, and again, if you were trying to get your lines straight in camera, you might not have had a tilt shift. So you might not have been able to raise it up, but I would have liked to have seen the entire lamp up here again, instead of cropping into it. So I might have taken just a little bit off of the bottom in order to get the lamp at the top. And if you have a tilt shift lens, you probably could have done that easily. If you're trying to keep the line straight in camera, that's going to be tough without the tilt shift, but you could again expand a little bit and come back in and let the lines go when you capture and correct them in Photoshop. So I'm going to give this image an 8.
Bark marks.
So in this particular image, I don't think it shows up as well on the screen as it does on the screen we're watching here in the room as it does on a computer screen, but it's really nice model light in this image. And I think that's really effective with all the textures because we've got a nice mix of kind of the cooler colors with the warmer colors, and the modeled light really helps that a lot. So, you know, I think that was working quite well. It did look like that we had some fall off in sharpness on the edges. So, you know, if I have an image like this, ideally, I'd like to try and get sharpness all the way through. But you know, overall, I think it was nice. It's a very abstract image, which I like. So, you know, that becomes somewhat subjective, but I think, you know, compositionally it was handled well and the lighting was nice. So I'm going to give it an 8.
Autumn finds Mount Fuji.
Well, you know, and again, it's a beautiful mountain. You've got great fall color here in the foreground. I think compositionally, you handled all of that very nicely. It's not, you know, because our sky is sort of bland, it's not maybe as dramatic. Again, that's just landscape photographers have to just wait for the right conditions to get those really dramatic skies. There's just no other way around it. But I think given you know, given what you had to work with, I think you did a good job on composition. It looks sharp. I like kind of the misty look that you have. I like the clouds that are coming across. The foreground trees look a little bit on the contrasty side. So you might be able to go into your processing software again and bring up the shadow detail a little bit and get that to maybe not look quite so contrasty, which would improve it. But a lot of the elements are really working well. I'm going to give it an 8.
This is Water Lily. And Bob, after this image, since we're almost halfway through or about halfway through, we'll stop and pick up the couple 9s and 10s that we've gotten already.
All right, great. So again, you really were very, very lucky in terms of the reflections on the water. That's working really, really well in the image. Now, this again is really a question of, you know, how do you crop this and where do you position? So in this particular image, you know, this main flower is what I would call the subject. And it is, you know, it's not a bad horizontal. I don't think it's a bad horizontal. You can go that direction, but you could also have done more of a vertical shot where it would almost be symmetrical with the 2 buds on the side of the main flower. So I might have considered going that way instead of the horizontal cropping. And the other thing I would have definitely looked at is this patch up here of lily pads in your upper right corner. Definitely pull my eye away from the subject. So if you could have moved to get those out of the way so that you have the darker water and that's the only thing in your background, that's certainly one option. Photoshop is another option to try and remove something like this. You know, the dark strip you kind of have on the left-hand side at the top also really doesn't need to be there. So even with a horizontal crop, you could have come down and cropped a little bit more, but I think really that green vegetation needs to be removed. The lighting, yeah, go ahead.
Could that be darkened?
You know, it could be darkened, but I think it would be stronger if it weren't there. You know, and so again, I think it's a question of, you know, looking at the image, I can't tell what kind of pathway you have or where you could have moved. But if you could have moved just a little bit, you might have been able to get it out completely, especially if you went to a vertical crop and a little bit tighter on the image. And with Photoshop nowadays, you really can do a pretty good job of taking those things out altogether. So I would definitely consider that. But you've got really nice sharpness in the whole image. And you know, I like for the way that you did frame it. I mean, assuming that you couldn't really move and get this out, you know, I think you did a good job on that. So I'm going to give it an 8. And then we'll take a break. And
Yes, we've got 4 images by my count that are 9s or 10s. The first one is going to be A Quiet Place from Gary Witt.
This is the library in downtown Seattle. My daughter moved there in October, and my wife and I helped her move there. And we had the benefit of a friend of hers who is grown up in Seattle, and he took us all around downtown. And I love architectural imagery and reflections and things, and this building is just phenomenal inside and out. So you know, I love all the architectural stuff in the top portion, which is what I spent a lot of time on, but I happened to look over a railing and saw that light streaming through in this particular spot, and I just kind of fell in love with this. So shot it several times, and just like the way the focus was on that table down there. Didn't even think about straightening it here.
Well, that's what I'm here for. To just, you know, I have to find something helpful to say, right? No, it's beautiful.
Very nice, very nice. Thank you, Gary. This is Autumn Waterfall from John Mumford.
Yes, this was taken in Norway last September, up in the northern end on the Lofoten Islands. And this was just a waterfall on the side of the road. And it was really an experiment for me with doing slower shutter speeds. Because I hadn't done very many, so this is one of my first attempts at doing that.
Yeah, good job.
Very nice. Thank you, John. This is Wild Cherry from Joe Bonita.
There.
There you are. Okay,
There
gotcha.
I am. This is, you're right, it's a studio shot, but what I did was I put a white cardboard behind the thing quite a ways back, lit that with the light and had it come through from the backlighting, because otherwise you'd get some kind of a reflection off the glass and it'd be pretty awful.
Yep.
Otherwise, there's really not much to say about it.
Well, Joe, I just want to know if you drank the wine after you shot it.
Oh, sure.
Of course. Couldn't
Oh,
waste it, right?
sure. But it was cheap wine.
Very nice. Thank you, Joe.
Oh. Very nicely done.
Thank you.
And Oz, would you like to explain this wonderful image?
Sure. Taken in Antarctica within a month. We were in a Zodiac cruising around these icebergs. And this was one of the shots I took. I darkened the background a bit. Too much else. That's it.
Nicely done.
That's lovely.
Yeah, very nice.
Okay. Back to the show.
Do we have a title on that one?
Yes, we do. It's called Ducks on Ice.
Well, that's appropriate. At least they're not stuck in the ice.
Exactly, yeah.
Which does happen sometimes, unfortunately, with wildlife. So, whenever you come across a situation like this, it is great. It's really unique, and you got very nice spacing on all of the ducks. I think that worked out really well. There are a lot of different ways you could have gone with this. Had I been photographing it, I might have focused in more on just 2 or 3 ducks at a time. I think, there are a lot of ducks. They're all sharp, that's handled well. They're in a nice formation. They're all separated, so you don't have a lot of awkward mergers. So what you have here, you handled well. And it may have been you didn't have a longer lens and you couldn't crop in more, because that happens all the time. Sometimes you're just wandering around and you don't have what you need to do the shot you really want. But certainly there are all sorts of little vignettes in here that would make really good independent shots. So if you see this sort of thing again, I would work on those. In terms of compositionally, for the shot that you do have, I would have cropped it just a little bit more. I would have made it a long horizontal, because again, all of this water or ice that we have at the top of the frame is really not helping our subject at all. So you could crop all of that out. You might be able, if you processed again, to get a little more detail in some of the shadow areas, especially on the ducks that are to the right. I mean, we've got nicer light on of course this middle duck and the ducks that are on the left. So it would be nice to bring up a little more shadow detail on the ducks on the right. But it's sharp and it's nice for what it is. So I'm going to give it an 8.
This is Ethereal.
All right, so these kind of images are, they get really subjective, right? Because you either love them or you hate them, and so, whenever I look at, and I actually really like this kind of thing. So just to let you know my bias sort of off the top, but we can still use some objective criteria when we're looking at images that are more abstract or creative like this, and I do think. Compositionally, I like the way you handled that. I think it makes a nice long panorama. We've got good space. We're really following sort of a rule of thirds perspective with it by having, and this looks like a building or something here. I like the contrast of color that you have. Now, I will say that on my computer screen, when I looked at this, the foreground here, this white patch is really blown out. So, it would help a lot if we had, more detail in that. It's hard for me. It looks like it might be snow or something, but it would be nice to have some sort of detail in there. You could even in an image like this, because it's so abstract, you could even select that area and just add some color or something in Photoshop that I think would improve it a little bit. And then on the top portion of the image, the blue or the cyan, maybe more of what we're seeing here, just looked a little strange on my monitor. It actually looks better here on this screen than it did on my monitor. So I would go in and I would maybe play with the hue on this upper color and just play with the colors to see how they might match differently. But I actually kind of really like the motion and the abstractness of it. So I like that part of it. So I'm going to go ahead and give it an 8, but I would continue to, maybe play with it.
Out in the cold.
That looks like it's out in the cold. Really cute, cute little guy standing there on the branch. So, when you have such a small subject like this, you almost need to use negative space. It's hard to get closer without scaring it anyway. So I think that was handled very well. Again, you're following the rule of thirds. So I like the fact that you left your negative space in front of the animal, and there's plenty of it, but that's okay because we've got these nice branches. Nothing's, we've got this out of focus branch intersecting, but that really doesn't bother me. It's enough out of focus. It's okay. If I really wanted to get picky about things, I might go into Photoshop and take this one out that's just merging into the body. But that's, that's getting really nitpicky. I would, however, I think crop down from the top a little bit more. These branches that are at the top right of the image, again, aren't really helping us. The other branches that we have coming around and in front are really acting as a frame, but the top images aren't really doing much for us. So I think you could just crop in a little bit more. The other thing is here, it looks pretty good on this screen. On my screen, it looked to me like it could use maybe a little bit more color saturation to bring out these leaves. I think these are leaves. And maybe it didn't look like we had maybe quite as good a black point as I'd like to see. So you could just work on maybe just bringing your black point down a little bit. But otherwise, I think it's a very pleasing image. So I'm going to give it an 8.
Courthouse.
All right, so I'm assuming this is from Arches. So it's a beautiful rock formation. Now, you've got good light that's coming on. You've got a nice deep blue sky, which I think actually works fairly well when you're going to go so tight into an image. I might have left a little bit more space around it. Again, we're feeling a little bit of crowded, especially to the left of the formation. But when you don't have a lot of interest in the sky, I think going a little bit tighter makes a lot of sense because there's, you don't have clouds. Now, if you have a sky like this, nowadays with sky replacement, you can do a different composition that you want and add clouds later. So that's always something to think about. But if you're just going to keep it as captured, I think going tighter is good. We're just a little tight on the top and especially that left side. So I would give a little more space there. In terms of technicals though, however, when I did look at this image on the computer, for this sort of a situation, I really think you need to have the entire image in focus. And the foreground was definitely out of focus, and it looked like the top was going out of focus too. So we've got some technical things to work on there. And I'd also probably come in, and again, we've got nice light coming across the face, but I would probably try and pull these shadow areas up a little bit more to get just a little more detail in the shadow areas under the bushes and on the other side of the rock. And that'll make it look a little less contrasty. So I'm going to give this a 7.
Enjoying the view from Mount Evans.
Yeah, and the marmots are really fun up there. It's a great place to photograph them. So in this particular image, obviously our subject again is the marmot. And there were several ways I think you could have gone with this. I kind of like showing this big rock. You certainly didn't have to. You could have cropped in tighter, and I think it would have worked very well to crop in tighter on the rock. If you're going to show the entire rock the way you did here, I personally would have probably lowered my camera position just a little bit because I'm seeing the road here. And I think if we would have lowered our camera position, it would have raised the marmot into this area of the mountain, this middle area. You don't want it to merge with any of the lines in the mountains, but we could have raised it up just a little bit and we could have gotten rid of this road area in the background. I think it would have improved it. Otherwise, I would probably just crop into this rock and just get the bottom part of the road out. You don't really need to show the whole rock in this image because you are so focused on the marmot. So, you know, if you come in tighter, you can still show a good section of the rock and you can still get a sense of the mountains and the stacking of the mountains back here, but you could crop some off the top, crop the bottom of the rock, just come in a little bit tighter. Make sure you keep the marmot to the right so it's looking into the frame and you're using the rule of thirds. I would probably, just to get really nitpicky, I would probably go in and try and take out these little white areas that are just off of the nose of the marmot. They're, you know, they're really not helping us, and it would be really easy to spot those out so that they have that solid blue color. And then you do need to come in and try and open up the shadow detail a little bit more and make that eye pop out. So this is again where I would probably go in and select the eye and brighten just the eye as well to really get it to pop. But you know, it's a nice clean image, and I like the way the mountains stack and the colors, and so I'm going to go ahead and give it an 8. It looks sharp too, and you can improve it if you want.
After Dark, Queen Anne Hill.
All right, so again, another architectural image. Now, you know, whenever you're looking at these kind of images with lights at night, one of the things that'll really help you is if you can do it more at dusk. I mean, I think it was well handled for the, you know, the night scene that you have, but it would have been really powerful at dusk. And the other thing that would have happened if we had shot this with dusk, so dusk meaning we still have some color or light in the sky, and we try and balance that out with the lights of the city. And what that would have also done for us is it would have given us some more detail in the foreground. And for me, in this particular image, the foreground, because we don't have any detail, is really kind of blocking me again. It's distracting me. So I would have almost rather have been, you know, on this rooftop over here, just looking at the city lights and not have sort of the trees and stuff in the foreground if I'm going to go this dark. If you had done it at dusk, you probably would have had enough detail in these foreground areas that it would have worked better. So, you know, it's sharp. It's nicely composed. Again, we're using the rule of thirds. You know, I like the way we've got a starburst with a, you know, an aperture. When you close down a little bit more, you get the nice starburst on some of the lights. So those things are working well, but it really is blocking quite a bit in the foreground here. So, you know, where you have access to a great location like this, you know, go back and work on the image when you still have some light in the sky. And it would make it, you know, it would turn what I'm going to give an 8 into more like a 10. So.
Roadblocks Ahead.
And another great title. I like the title. You know, obviously this shot without the little girl would not be nearly as dramatic. I mean, the little girl makes this shot because it gives you scale. You know, it helps direct your eye. I really like the way you cropped it as a long panoramic. I think going to black and white again was really smart. I think it makes it a much more dramatic image that way. So, you know, there's not a lot that I would change about it. I might have left just a tiny bit more room on the lower portion of the image. I'm feeling a little bit crowded. I'd like to have her have just a little more room at the base. But, you know, overall, I really like the image and I'm going to give it a 10.
Nature's Artwork.
So, and again, this image is kind of going into more of the abstract approach, and I really do like abstracts. So, I like the contrast you have with the green and the kind of magenta color. I think that works really, really well. Those are complementary colors, so that works well together. The lighting on the shadow, again, I like what the lighting is doing to the shadows. I think it gives a layer of depth and abstraction to the scene. Now, if we look at it compositionally, though, we really do need to move it over. I want to move it this way to the right, because we've got a lot of negative space to the left of the vegetation that really isn't doing much for us. And we've got, what looks to me like maybe some more interesting shapes in the texturing of the paint or whatever's peeling that could be off to the right. So, I think you did a good job in terms of the crop on the top and bottom, but I just would have liked to have moved everything over to the right a little bit. So I'm going to give it a 7.
Many architectural styles.
So this is really interesting building and nice shapes. I think the framing works really well. Again, you're using the rule of thirds, so that's appropriately done. I might have left a little more room again on the bottom. I think we're crowding here. Whenever I have anything that has a base, so I've got a bridge here with a base, I want to give it enough room that it's comfortably sitting on the base. I don't want to feel crowded. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of the water here, to give it some more room. And again, I don't know what you might have been trying to crop out something that's over to the left or over to the right. So you have to think about those things. But there's also nothing wrong with doing kind of a more panoramic kind of long perspective vertically, right? So you don't always have to just stick with the 2:3 aspect ratio. So think about that too, if you have a situation where you really need some more space on the bottom or top, but you don't want to get what you have on the two sides. I like the way we have some color reflecting in this. I like these shapes that are coming in. The thing that I don't like as well about this image, and it's sharp and the perspectives are nice and all of that, is I don't like having this brighter part of the sky on the top with this kind of line going through the clouds. Now, again, that's kind of nature. And so as an architectural photographer or landscape photographer, your only option is to either go back night after night until you get a better sunset, which I think would have helped, or you can now go in also and try sky replacement. And that's what I might do for this image, is I might go in and try a sky replacement and see if I could put a more dramatic sunset image behind it. And then just remember, if you do something like that, you also want to make sure that you pay attention to the water reflection down here, because otherwise it won't look proper. So, I think, but I do really like the image, so I'm going to give it a 9, but I think you could improve it by either going back again or sky replacement. All right, and this is
cod fishermen's cabins. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no worries. I didn't wait. That was my fault. Norway again. I recognize that this is a wonderful place to go if you ever have a chance. So, I think you did a nice job on your composition. Again, you're using the rule of thirds very effectively. Your placement of the mountains and the cabins works really well. When I looked at this on my computer, it looked a little bit over processed. So I'm not exactly sure what you did in your processing, but I would go back in this image and try reprocessing it again. It's really quite bright up here, so I might try and balance it out a little bit more and try and bring this down a little bit and bring this up a little bit, make the mountain a little bit brighter and make the sky to the right a little bit darker. But overall, I like the way you composed it. The other thing, if you go back again and you're going to be photographing a situation like that, one thing I like to do often when I don't have water that's really doing anything that's particularly interesting, I will put, a really strong neutral density filter on the camera and do a really long shutter speed, even a minute or more, to just make the water again really silky smooth. And I think that would give this image a lot of drama too. So it's harder for us you can do some water things in Photoshop to simulate that, but it's nicer if you capture it in the field. So I'm going to give this an 8.
Modern living.
So again, architectural, it's just a really nice image. It works really well in black and white. Again, I don't think it would have worked as well in color. It's got great patterns. It's dramatic. It captures my eye. The lines are straight. I took my little line bar across. They're really pretty straight. So, so you did a good job there. So, it is contrasty, but when I looked at it on the monitor, it did look like we had detail in all the white areas, and the black areas really, don't need detail. You want some black. So I felt like the contrast was appropriate for this kind of an image. So I'm going to give it a 10. I liked it. All right. And the title?
Yes. Milo Snowdrops.
So another adorable dog. It's hard not to love the dogs. So again, anytime we have a person or an animal, we really need those eyes to be sharp. And so in this particular image, the nose is sharp, but the eyes are not. So again, now that we have digital, I really like to be able to get the nose sharp as well. It used to be, if I were photographing a subject like this in the film days, I wouldn't have been able to do both. So I would have just focused on the eyes and I would have let the nose fall wherever it had to fall. But with digital, we can stop down really as much as we want. And one thing I do really like about this image that you would lose if you stop down is kind of this nice soft vignette we have all the way around. Because I like the fact that it's tight. I think that works really well. It's just we have to have the eyes sharp. So if I were going to go back and redo it, I would stop down and get the nose and the eyes in focus. And again, when you put your focus point, you don't want to put it right on the eye, because it's going to be harder to pull for the camera to pull the nose into focus if you're photographing with your focus point on the eyes. So you want to probably put your focus point in between the nose and the eyes and then stop down more. So it'll pull a little bit more in back and get those eyes sharp. And then I would come into Photoshop and I would create this blur effect that you have because you're, more wide open in Photoshop, which you could do relatively easily. So you can kind of keep all of the nice characteristics of this image, but get that sharpness that we'd really like to see in the nose and the eyes. Also, the eyes and the shadow areas in the mouth and everything are going a little bit dark. So we need to do some brightening of the shadow areas and maybe some selection of those eyes to make those pop a little bit more. And I think even overall, you could probably brighten the whole image up just a little bit. So go back and work on this one some more. I'm going to give it a 7.
Okay, Bob, can you hold on to that image for just a second? Cheryl, once or twice you've mentioned that we can use any aperture we want in digital. I want you to clarify that. What I'm thinking that you're talking about is with digital, we can change our ISO, or we can set our camera to auto ISO to use a higher one. Is that what you're referring to?
So basically what I'm saying is that, in the film days, we really didn't have a lot of digital tools that would allow us to control our background separately from our capture technique. So if we wanted a nice blurred out background, we had to open up the aperture in order to blur out the background. And because we would do that, we would have a limited depth of field. And so it might not be possible, like in an image like this, to get the eyes and the nose sharp. But with digital, again, anytime you change one setting, you're going to have to compensate somewhere else. So yes, you will, if you close down, you will have to increase your ISO to get enough light and get the proper exposure. But I always, the way I always teach it is choose the shutter speed that you need to stop the action. And you may want a slow shutter speed to blur it too, but choose the shutter speed that you want. Choose the aperture that you need for the depth of field that you want. And then let the ISO go wherever it has to go. So I do use auto ISO a lot with exposure compensation, but if you're in full manual, you'd be setting all those 3 settings, you know, independently. But the aperture choice is based on how much depth of field you need in the image. And just keep in mind, the more you magnify, we're really magnified here because we're so tight on the dog that you have to stop down more to get more depth of field when you're more magnified. You know, if we were further away from the dog, we might have gotten the nose and the eyes in focus, but because we're so magnified, we have a very narrow depth of field. So we have to stop down even more. So I just let that ISO go wherever it has to go. And I choose the shutter speed and the aperture based on what I need. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. Hopefully it makes sense to everybody in the room. And
Is that
on Zoom
clear
too.
to everybody? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
All right.
Very good. Thank you.
You
Let's
bet.
continue. Light through the door.
So I really like the simplicity of this image, and I like the light coming through. I think it's a subdued color. I'm glad you didn't go completely black and white with this, because I do like kind of these warm tones that we have. So all of that's working really well. The problems that we have in the images, it wasn't quite sharp enough. So I don't know if you were on a tripod for this or not, but again, I'm a real advocate for tripod use. So anytime you can use a tripod, do use a tripod, because it really helps with our image quality, especially when we're in a situation like this. And then you can, you know, again, you can use the settings you really want without increasing your ISO so much, you know, especially for objects that are sitting still. So it wasn't quite sharp. And then compositionally, again, I think in this image, we have more at the bottom of the image than we need. So you could either just, it's a 2:3, you know, aspect ratio. Now you could either just, you know, change the aspect ratio and crop a little off the bottom. Or if you were photographing it again, I would just, you know, maybe show a little bit more above the door than I'm showing of the floor, because the floor really isn't telling us anything. So I think from that standpoint, it's good. But because of the technical flaws, I'm going to give it a 7.
How did you at the bird feeder?
All right. So photographing around bird feeders is a great way to capture birds. And, you know, again, this is a technically difficult shot because they're moving in and out really fast. So I commend you for that. You did a really good job of freezing, you know, the action and freezing it at a very good moment where you have good separation between the 2 birds, and they're both in very nice positions. So that's complicated on its own. Now, in terms of improving the image, I think that, again, we're sort of cropping the tail over here. And so whenever you're photographing something like this, where you've got birds that are moving, I would give myself quite a bit of extra room, because again, our sensors are so good nowadays, we can crop later. And I'd really like to see the whole tail. So, you know, it's still a good image, but I think having that tail in would have been more pleasing to the eye. And it also, it makes it a little bit easier too to capture these kind of things when you give yourself a little bit more room. So, but I mean, look at how sharp the heads are of both birds. So you've done really well on that. The other thing that I would consider doing, and again, you know, when you're setting up feeders, you have more flexibility, but with your background, because it's more like a studio, it's more like a setup. And it does become distracting to me to have such a bright area behind the birds within these dark patches. So I would have liked to have seen, you know, maybe a more consistent background that's a little bit darker. And that way the birds, you know, I'm not.
Okay, we're going to use the room microphone now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. So one of the things you can do if moving the feeders to get a better natural background isn't an option, is you can even take a piece of paper or a blanket that's a nice green color or something and hang it up in the background and kind of create a little studio environment in the outdoors. So think about that. But your background is really very, very important. A background can make or break an image. So, you know, while we want to concentrate on the subject and make sure all of those elements are working well, we also really need to pay attention to our backgrounds. So, but this was really a very difficult shot to get, and I'm going to give it an 8.
Skate park scooter trick.
All right, so back to the other skate park shot we were looking at. So this is kind of, getting along into that idea that I was talking about just having the feet. And I like that. I like that idea. So, I think I like the abstraction of this image. I like the way we've got, kind of these shapes coming into the image in the dark area and the white shoes contrasting against the dark. I would have liked, if I could have, I would have liked to have moved the feet and the legs just a little bit more to the right so that it's more in this dark negative space area. I think the fact that it's kind of merging into the lighter concrete up here makes it a little less powerful. So I think, you're definitely on the right track here. I think it makes a good abstract sort of image. We also have some sharpness issues. So just, again, I would make sure that you're stopping down enough that you're going to get both feet into focus because that's really your subject here are the feet. So I'd go back and try this again and just, keep reshooting it until you get a composition that really works. So I'm going to give it a 7.
Pair bonding.
This is great behavior. I mean, you did a fantastic job of capturing, the perfect moment. I like that you zoomed right in to, really their faces. We really don't have a lot of extra parts of the penguins that distract us from the action. It's a nice balance. Compositionally, you did a really good job on your highlight detail and your shadow detail. It's very sharp. All of that is working really well. The background is our problem here, right? So, I mean, this would definitely be a really high rating image if the background were better. And this is a really, really good candidate for background replacement in Photoshop. The mask on this would not be terribly difficult. I mean, you've got pretty distinct lines. So I would take this image back in and I would select the entire background out, and you could try a couple of different techniques. I mean, you could just select the background and you could try to blur it, and you can blur quite a bit in Photoshop, although you do have a lot of modeling and dark and light areas. So I might just try and take another image of just a blurred out background and just replace it. And I mean, you'll see it right away. The minute you do it, if you compare those two images, you will see the difference. It just draws your eye right into the subject instead of having your eye get distracted with these background elements. Okay, so I'm going to give it an 8, but there's no question it would be a 10 with the background improvements. I mean, it would be one of the best shots we have tonight. Does that make sense?
Exploratory drilling for fish extraction.
Great title again. You guys are really good at titles. So, again, I like the image for what it's depicting. I think it uses the rule of thirds. It's got all these little, interesting placements of gear, and they're all separated out. So it's not confusing. It's nicely spaced. When I looked at this on my computer, I really had more kind of nice color that I could see in these little patches of open ice, which I think added a really nice element. It's not showing up as well here on this screen, but that worked really well. And I also liked how you brightened the two men. They're very important. And so, I think adding some emphasis to them really helps to direct your eye through the picture. It did look like the image was a little bit overall dark. So the snow was looking a little more muddy and not quite as bright white. So I think you could raise the overall brightness. I mean, you've got a little bit of soft vignetting, which I like. I would keep that, but I would just bring the overall brightness up a little bit. You don't want to lose detail in your white areas, but you also want the snow to look white and not gray. And it was starting to look a little bit gray. So I'm going to give this an 8.
Brown pelican.
Now, again, I like the black and white on this. It's very difficult, I think, to get black and white to work well with wildlife. But in this particular case, I think it does work extremely well. Our light is quite contrasty here, but you know, anytime you have contrasty light, try it in black and white, because it's amazing what you can get away with in black and white that you would never get away with in color. So, you know, you might be able to soften the contrast a little bit by just, again, bringing up your shadow detail and processing. So I might play with that a little bit, but you definitely do not want to lose your nice black background or your black foreground. I mean, that's I think one of the nicest things about this image is that, you know, we're just really following the light into the eye. We have a nice curve of the bird, and you know, it's not giving us anything to pull our eye away from the subject. We're really leading the viewer right where they want to go. So work on the contrast just within the bird itself. You might, I think you're kind of right on the edge of blowing a highlight over there. I would play with the shadow slider and the highlight slider and just try and make it a little less contrasty in the body. But I really quite like this image, so I'm going to give it a 9.
Lamentation.
All right, so in this particular image, it's a little difficult for me to tell exactly what it is or where it is. It looks like some sort of statue or artwork, and I know that you know, within the rules, photographing, you know, someone else's artwork or statue can be graded down a little bit. However, you know, I think the way the light was handled is really quite beautiful. And I suspect that you had to work with that a little bit. I doubt that this was something you just went out and captured all on its own. So I think the way you composed it, again, we have this nice rule of thirds with our negative space to the right and this kind of circular person figure leading around, and all of these lines with the accentuated light. And this did not look, this looked better on the computer. So it looks a little more contrasty here. It actually looked quite nice on the computer. So I'm going to give it a 9. And I think the lighting was just handled really nicely in the composition.
This ain't your daddy's T-bird.
And you guys are really good at the titles. So this image actually looks quite different on this screen than it does on the computer. So I think, you know, keeping that in mind is a really good thing. There's a lot more magenta in the clouds, which I really liked, because we have kind of because the planes are in shadow, we're getting a blue tone in our planes, and it contrasts very nicely with the magenta in the background. So, you know, the formation is really nice. We don't have anything merging. They're spaced nicely. That's all working really well. The color, like I said, it was much better on the computer screen. So just imagine this more of like a pink sunset sort of look in the background. Now, in terms of some technical things, the trails were really blowing out a lot. So it would have been nice to get a little more detail if we could have, so they're not quite so blown out in the back. So that would have been an exposure issue at the time of capture. I don't think you can pull anything in here. So you might be able to burn this down a little bit so that it's not so bright, because again, it just pulls my eye away from the planes. I'd like to stay more focused on the planes, and those bright spots pull me away. The other thing is I actually took this image on the computer and I brightened my shadows again. And I think that helped a lot with the airplanes. So just taking the shadow slider and brightening up the shadowed airplanes. I like the blue color, so I wouldn't mess with the color at all. I like the fact that we're letting the shadows go blue and we've got the pink background. And then the other thing too is if you have some additional frames, I'm hoping that you shot this, along the path. I would like to see it more in just the clouds. I think this kind of line that we have with the blue sky on the left side is a little bit distracting. I would have rather captured it a little bit sooner when it's just in the pink clouds. So go back through your files and see if you have an image where it's not getting over to the blue sky yet. And do those things. But I like it. I'm going to give it an 8.
Union Station.
I've actually seen quite a few images from this area of Union Station, and there's really quite a lot to work with down here. So, I think some of the really nice things you have going for the image are these shapes that you're using. However, when I look at it, I'm really struggling to define the subject here, right? I mean, is it Union Station itself? Is it the track? It doesn't really seem like the track because I don't see it very well. Doing an overall scene is fine, but I think you have some really nice elements within this image to work with. And so again, this is a place we can go back to. And I would just, instead of trying to capture the whole scene like you have here, where we have really not a super well-defined subject and we have a lot of negative space that I don't think is really helping us a lot, I would take what's really working well and just crop in to where you get the name of Union Station with this curved structure around it, and then the lines that you have to the right of it, and not even worry about the track and everything else. I would make it more of an abstract sort of image. And you could move your positioning a little bit to maybe give a little bit more room to the right of the lettering. But do you see how nice this is up here? Right? I mean, this is just beautiful in the top right portion of the image. And I don't really need to see anything else that's on the bottom or to the left. So I would just go back and try this again. It'll be a new shot, so you can enter it and really concentrate on just these shapes. And, it's even better if you get a nice sky in this area, but you could do it. You could do it vertically. If you had a nice sky, you could do it horizontally, but play with just all of these shapes that you have in this upper right section. So I'm going to give it a 7. But it has a lot of potential.
Okay, we're coming near the end. We got 2 more images left. So hang in there, people. We're almost done.
All right.
This is A Close Shave.
Yeah. So that's an appropriate title. I think this image tells a really nice story. And again, I really do like that it's in black and white. I think it works a lot better than in black and white than it probably would have worked in color. So I think it was handled well, the way you composed it. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with the way you composed it. It does tell a good story this way. However, just for kicks, I'd like you to try to go back and crop it more like a square and just come in and get rid of the man's face at the top. And just crop in really tight. And I would just, for the tighter crop, I would get rid of the door frames or window frames, whatever these are. I mean, they do help to tell a story. So this is one approach, right? And I don't think it's bad at all. But what really interests me about this image is what's going on, right next to the ear and the hands. And I love the hand position. His upper hand position is beautiful. So I really just don't feel like I need all of this other information. I really want to just zoom into this little tight area. And so if you just crop off, the man at the top, you crop out the window frames, which are bright white anyway, and tend to bring our eye away from the subject. And just include this area where all the action is, where the shave is happening. I think it would be a stronger image. So, can everybody see that that's in the room? Yeah. So, you know, it's got a lot going for it, and I'm going to give it an 8, but I think you could really improve it a lot by just cropping. You could maybe brighten the shadows a little bit too, but.
And our last image is Little River, Great Smoky Mountains.
All right. All right, so again, we've got fall color with water, which is always, you know, always a great subject. And I think that, you know, you're on the right track here, but I think that there are several things that we could do to make this better. I mean, I like the moss emphasis on these rocks and the shapes and the way the rocks kind of, you know, lead us in here. But again, we're crowding some of these rocks at the bottom that are in the water a little bit too much. I'd like to see more of the water in the foreground here. In fact, and I don't know, you may not have been able to because you may have had to step in the water to do it, but I would have maybe moved in to the left a little bit to try and get a little more straight on perspective of the water and use this mossy rock on the bottom right to sort of frame it. I don't know that we need to see quite as much of that. While you did use a slower shutter speed, I would have slowed it down even a bit more. I think whenever you have these river scenes, they really tend to look better with the really, really smooth, silky water. They don't tend to look good if you use a really fast shutter speed. And if you're kind of in between, it doesn't work as well. So I would slow the shutter speed down even more. And, you know, don't be afraid to try a bunch of different shutter speeds. You know, we're not shooting film anymore. So we've got lots of frames we can use to capture different things. And sometimes it is difficult to see what's really the best in the field. So try a bunch of different shutter speeds. And also don't be afraid to zoom in on your camera after you take a shot. You know, use the screen and zoom in and see if you like the amount of blur you have and make adjustments in the field because you've got plenty of time in a scene like this. The light's not changing that much and, you know, nothing's moving except the water. So you've got the time. You know, we've got some nice color in the background. Again, you know, whenever I'm photographing a scene like this, I will usually throw my polarizer on because it does help get rid of reflections that we have and it'll help saturate the color or the fall color. So a lot of times when I'm doing fall color shots with or without water, I'll throw that polarizer on. It's really amazing how much it can help. So think about that. And then, you know, the shadow areas are really blocking up here quite a bit. So you might be able to improve that with some processing as well. But I will also shoot these kind of scenes for an HDR often when I'm doing landscapes. In fact, I shoot almost all of my landscape scenes now with a bracket in case I want to take it into an HDR software program. It doesn't take me really much extra time to get a couple of bracketed frames. And then I can pull the correct exposure if I want, or I can go into HDR software. So think about that as well when you're in a situation like this. But you know, I think if you can go back here again, I would try some of those things, and I think you'll really be pleased with the results you get. But it was nice and sharp. So, you know, from that standpoint, you did a lot of those things very well. I'm going to give it a 7.
Yeah, we've got 5 images to go look at. Right, and this would be Danny Lamb, Roadblocks Ahead.
The picture was taken in Goblin Canyon State Park, Utah last year. It was about sunset time, and I saw a girl running down to the canyon, and I just had enough time to find a good place to take this picture. I cropped the top portion of the image and focused the image on the rocks and girl. And for this image, I think black and white image can enhance the beautiful contrast and the texture of the rocks.
Yep, nicely done.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really like that image, Danny. That was beautiful.
Yeah,
thanks.
It's really nice.
Okay. And many architectural styles. This is Dan Greenberg.
Sorry about that. Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes, we can. Yep.
Okay, so this was obviously taken in London a couple years back with a point and shoot camera, believe it or not, with a Sony RX100. I do actually, I did like your suggestion about, I didn't, when I processed this back a few years ago, I just did it as is. I mean, I did take out a whole bunch of cranes and things like that. But otherwise, it's kind of like it was. And I think, yeah, your idea of putting in a different sky would actually benefit this. So thanks.
You bet. You bet. Yeah, no, I think it's a really nice image. And I think with a different sky, it would be a fabulous image. So.
Yeah. And I could probably add some water to the bottom too, to make the post stand out. So. Yes, I think you could. I definitely think you could. And good call on taking out the cranes and things. I mean, I think no, the cranes were
nice
terrible.
Simple. Yeah.
So thank you.
You bet.
Nice. Thank you, Dan. This is Modern Living from Joe Bonita.
I have a voice again. This is actually a composite. The buildings are out by Union Station, these apartment buildings. And what I was trying to do was to get my own feeling about the what do you want to call it? The bland uniformity of modern living spaces.
Yeah.
And so what I did, but just one of the buildings didn't work so well. So I added on the right part of the other building, made it a little smaller to fit in and all that to get this pattern. And it was shot in color, but turned into black and white, obviously.
No, nicely done. I think that was the right call.
Thank you.
I think it works really well.
Thank you.
And it does make a good statement too. I think it, it says something.
Well, that's what I was trying to do. I thought I have a series of pictures called Modern Offices too, which, they're all steel and glass or, something, and they all look the same.
Very good. Well, thank you, Joe. And thanks for another nice composite image that we didn't even realize was a composite.
It was well done.
Yes, very well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
And this is the brown pelican from Laura Blake. And Laura popped into the chat, said that she doesn't have a microphone. But did say thank you for the kind words, very helpful critique. And I will just say, it's being that I lived in Florida for a whole lot of years, this is an awesome image. It's fantastic. And last we have Victoria Ashby's Lamentation.
Yes, first, thank you for your comment. And I have a fascination with doors. So we were in Barcelona at this huge church, and it had like a 12 to 14 foot door, and it had all these various icons on it. And I happened to find this one, and I really liked it. So I just took a photograph of it, and you're right. I spent time and changed the coloring and everything and kind of made it my own. And if you went to that door, you would never recognize it. It was like just a heavy metal door, but I just loved the form and the texture on that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And what you did with the lighting and the colors really made it special. So yeah.
Thank you.
You
Very
bet.
nice. Victoria, all the stuff on the right-hand side, did you add all that, or was that on the board?
No, that was there.
Oh, wow.
That was all in there,
All the
including those
scratches and
little
everything?
numbers and everything. That's how it was.
Very nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very nice
thank
work.
you. Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes our evening of wonderful images from the Focus Camera Club.
Yeah, great job, everybody. It was fun to be here again. Thank you for having me.
Yes, applause all around. Applause all around. Cheryl, do you have any final comments for the crowd there?
Not really, unless anybody has some questions. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask before we conclude the meeting?
I do have a comment.
Sure.
I heard you a lot of times saying crop and closer, so fill the frame, as I say, with your subject.
Well, really, just identify your subject and make sure that anything in the frame that's remaining is supporting the subject. If it does not support the subject and help draw you into the subject, get rid of it, crop in tighter.
Yeah, does anybody on Zoom have any questions or comments? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, well, Cheryl, obviously, thank you very much. We appreciate all the comments, all the commentary, all the wonderful, helpful hints. I'm glad that you could join us. I'm glad that you could be there in person too.
Yes, yes, thank you very much. Oh, and I will mention one more thing. If you do email me and I do not respond, please text or call me because my email can be very finicky sometimes. And especially from people I don't know, even sometimes people I do know. I have a friend who really, I have to use my personal email account because she cannot communicate with my business account. So we don't know why, we can't figure it out. So please just be aware, if I don't respond, it probably went into spam or into the cloud. Please just call me, text me, whatever, and we will connect because it's more reliable. So I like old fashioned phone calls. So there's nothing wrong with calling me. So yeah. Anyway, thank you.
And I can vouch for those issues because I had a little bit of trouble getting in touch, and I finally texted Cheryl, and we were able to connect and put together everything for this evening. So, obviously, for the people in the room, she's shared her website address. It's CherylOpperman.com. For all of you on Zoom, you can also find that too. And all the contact information is on our contact page on the website too. So very easily reachable.
Yes, yes, I will get to you. And if I'm out of town or traveling, I will have a message on my phone saying that I'm out, so you'll know. So if, I usually do a vacation response on my email too, but if the email gets lost in the cloud, you won't get that. So if you call, it's just a good way to make sure we connect.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Well, since I have everybody here, I just want to ask one question and I'll let y'all go and you can all go home or drop off a Zoom or whatever. But this meeting, we did go just a little bit long. And there has been some conversation and talk with some of the people in the club and some of the board. How do you all feel about doing a 10-minute break or so in the middle of a competition meeting, just to get up and stretch your legs? And this goes for the Zoom people too. You can get up and go get a drink or whatever you need to do. How do you all feel about that?
That's fine.
A break would be good. A break would be good.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
Yes.
The judge would be good. Judge
Right.
would be very good.
Okay.
The judge
All right,
would
well-
like a break too, I think, just to get a glass of water or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Right. Yeah.
We have quite a few images.
Okay. All right. Well, the general consensus, as I see, is that yeah, we'll be cool with that. So, all right. So with that, again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Cheryl, and y'all have a good week, and we'll see you at the next club meeting.
Okay.
Hey,
That's how.
Bye.
bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. It was really nice to see you all in person too.
Thank you.
You bet.